Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm your friend Gabriel. Today I'm going to tell you an amazing story. But first, let me get comfortable. Tada! What do you think of my chibi form? Now, let's begin our story. It was a small town in southern Indiana. One of those places where everyone seems to know everyone. Where life moves at a slower pace. And in this town lived a young girl named Shanda. She was just 12 years old, an age of innocence, or so it should have been. Shanda had a bright smile, a gentle heart, and a future that seemed to stretch out endlessly before her, full of all the promises that youth holds. She was a daughter, a sister, a student. She was just a kid, navigating the sometimes turbulent waters of growing up. And like any kid, she was looking for her place in the world, looking for friends, looking for acceptance. Shanda lived in a world that was, for the most part, ordinary. Her parents were divorced, a situation familiar to many children. She split her time between her mother's home in New Albany and her father's place across the river in Louisville, Kentucky. It was a life of two houses, two sets of rules, but she seemed to handle it with a maturity beyond her years. She was known for her kindness, for her eagerness to please. She was a good student at Hazelwood Middle School, a place where she felt comfortable and had a solid group of friends. But life, as we know, is rarely static. Change was on the horizon. A change that would alter everything. The decision was made for Shanda to switch schools, to leave the familiar halls of Hazelwood and start fresh at Hazelwood Junior High School. It was supposed to be a good thing, a new beginning, a chance to meet new people, to expand her world. No one could have known, not in their wildest nightmares, that this simple change, this ordinary step in a young girl's life, would set her on a collision course with unimaginable darkness. It was a path she did not choose, a fate she did not deserve. A new school meant new faces, and with new faces came new relationships. And one of those relationships would prove to be fatal. So, picture it. The late fall of 1991, the air is getting crisp, the school year is well underway. Shanda is walking into a new school, perhaps a little nervous, a little excited. She is on the cusp of her teenage years, a time of great change and discovery. She was simply looking for a friend, someone to talk to, someone to share secrets with. What she found, instead, was a tangled web of jealousy and obsession that would, in a few short months, lead to one of the most shocking crimes the state of Indiana had ever seen. A story that still echoes through those quiet country roads today. The hallways of Hazelwood Junior High School were a new frontier for Shanda. Different kids, different teachers, a different rhythm to the day. It can be a daunting experience for any child, to leave behind the comfort of the known for the uncertainty of the new. But Shanda, with her open and friendly nature, quickly began to find her footing. She was a pretty girl, easy to talk to, and it wasn't long before she caught the eye of another student. Her name was Amanda Hevron. Amanda was a little older, a little more experienced in the ways of the teenage world, and she and Shanda, they just clicked. It seemed at first like a perfectly normal friendship. This new friendship blossomed quickly. Amanda became Shanda's guide to this new social landscape. They would talk on the phone for hours, share notes in class, hang out after school. For Shanda, it might have felt like she had found the connection she was looking for, a best friend in a new place. Amanda introduced Shanda to her circle, pulling her into a world that was perhaps a bit faster, a bit more grown up than the one Shanda had known before. It was exciting, it was new, and for a 12-year-old girl, it was everything. But friendships, especially at that age, can be complicated things. And this one was more complicated than most. You see, Amanda Hevron was not just a friend. She was also the object of another girl's affection, a girl named Melinda Lovelace. Melinda was older, 15 years old, and she was intensely, possessively in love with Amanda. Theirs was a relationship full of drama and turmoil, a roller coaster of teenage emotion. And when Shanda entered the picture, becoming Amanda's new confidant, Melinda saw not a friend, but a rival, a threat, a problem that, in her mind, needed to be eliminated. The seeds of a dangerous obsession were being sown, watered by a potent cocktail of immaturity and jealousy. And so, the stage was set. Shanda, caught in the middle, likely had no idea of the storm that was gathering around her. She was just a girl, happy to have made a new friend. She couldn't have understood the depth of Melinda Lovelace's feelings for Amanda, or the rage that was building just beneath the surface. To Shanda, it was all just high school drama. Annoying perhaps, but nothing more. She couldn't know that she had unwittingly stepped into a love triangle. A triangle that wasn't about love at all but about control, obsession, and a darkness that was about to be unleashed. Melinda Lovelace was a name that would soon become infamous. At 15 she carried herself with a toughness that belied her age. She was known to have a temper, a possessive streak that flared up with little warning, and her world, it seemed, revolved around Amanda Hevron. In Melinda's mind, their relationship was the most important thing. It was everything. So when Amanda's attention shifted, even slightly toward the new girl Shanda, Melinda's world felt like it was tilting off its axis. She saw Shanda not as a person, but as an obstacle, a wedge being driven between her and Amanda, and her resentment began to fester. The conflict started small, as these things often do. Mean looks in the hallway. Whispered threats passed through mutual acquaintances. Melinda made her displeasure known, trying to intimidate Shanda, to scare her away from Amanda. She wanted Shanda to know that she was trespassing on her territory. For Shanda, a gentle soul who avoided conflict, it must have been terrifying. She tried to back away, to placate Melinda, even telling Amanda that maybe they shouldn't be friends anymore. But the situation had already taken on a life of its own. It was no longer just about a simple friendship. Amanda Hevron was caught in the middle, pulled in two different directions. On one side, her intense, demanding girlfriend Melinda. On the other, her sweet new friend Shanda. It's a difficult position for anyone, let alone a teenager. Did she try to calm the waters? Perhaps. But the drama may have also held a certain appeal, a certain power. To be the center of so much attention, the object of so much passion, however misguided. Whatever her motivations, her inability or unwillingness to decisively end the conflict only added fuel to Melinda's growing fire. The tension was escalating day by day, becoming something more sinister. And as the days turned into weeks, Melinda's anger didn't cool. It hardened. It transformed into a cold, calculated rage. She began to talk about Shanda, not just with anger but with a chilling desire for revenge. She started to recruit others to her cause, girls who were drawn to her charisma and her air of dangerous confidence. She painted Shanda as the villain, the one who was trying to steal her girlfriend, the one who deserved to be punished. And in the echo chamber of their small, troubled circle, this narrative took hold. A terrible idea began to form, a plan to teach Shanda Scherer a lesson she would never forget. Melinda Lovelace did not act alone. She was the architect of the plan, the driving force, but she needed accomplices. And she found them. 3 other teenage girls, each with her own set of troubles, each susceptible to Melinda's influence. There was Lori Tackett, 16 years old, a girl who cultivated a tough, rebellious image. She was drawn to the dark side of things, fascinated by the macabre. In Melinda's plan, she saw a twisted kind of excitement, a way to prove her own toughness. She became Melinda's eager and willing second-in-command, ready to see the plan through to its most brutal conclusion. Then there was Hope Rippey, 15. Hope was more of a follower, someone who seemed desperate for acceptance, for a place to belong. She was easily led, eager to please the older, more dominant girls in the group. When Melinda and Lori spoke of their plan for Shanda, Hope went along with it, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of a misguided sense of loyalty, or perhaps simply because she lacked the strength to say no. She would later claim she was scared, that she didn't want to participate, but on that fateful night, her fear was not enough to make her walk away. She got in the car. The 4th girl was Toni Lawrence, also 15. Toni was the youngest of the conspirators, and in many ways, the most conflicted. She knew Shanda. They weren't close friends, but they were acquainted. Toni was present when the planning took place, listening as Melinda's rage and Lori's enthusiasm filled the room. She was the one who was tasked with the initial deception, the one who would lure Shanda from the safety of her father's home. Like Hope, she was a follower, caught up in something far bigger and more terrible than she could likely comprehend. Her role was crucial, the first step in a chain of events that would lead to tragedy. And so the circle was complete. 4 girls bound together by a toxic mix of jealousy, peer pressure, and a profound lack of empathy. Melinda Lovelace, the obsessive leader. Lori Tackett, the cruel enforcer. Hope Rippey and Toni Lawrence, the impressionable followers. They fed off each other's worst impulses, escalating the rhetoric, normalizing the unthinkable. The talk of teaching Shanda a lesson evolved into something much darker. The plan was no longer just about scaring her. It was about hurting her. It was about making her pay for a crime she had never committed. The web of jealousy had been spun, and Shanda was about to walk right into it. January 10, 1992. That date is seared into the memory of a community. It started as a typical Friday night for Shanda Scherer. She was spending the weekend with her dad in Louisville. She was looking forward to a school dance, a night of fun with her friends. But she never made it to that dance. Instead, a car pulled up to the house. Inside were Lori Tackett, Hope Rippey, and Tony Lawrence. Melinda Lovelace was there too, hiding in the back, concealed under a blanket. Tony, the familiar face, was the one who went to the door. She was the bait. Tony told Shanda that Amanda Heverin wanted to see her, that they were going to a party, a place where they could all hang out. It was a lie, of course. A carefully crafted deception designed to lure Shanda away from safety. Shanda, trusting and perhaps a little naive, believed her. Why wouldn't she? Tony was a girl she knew from school. There was no reason to suspect anything was wrong. So she told her dad she was going out with friends for a little while. She got into the car, the door closed, and in that moment, her fate was sealed. The point of no return had been crossed. Almost immediately, the pretense was dropped. The friendly atmosphere vanished. Melinda Lovelace emerged from her hiding place, and the nightmare began. The girls confronted Shanda, their voices filled with accusation and rage. Melinda held a knife to Shanda's throat, threatening her, terrorizing her. The car, driven by Lori Tackett, didn't head towards any party. It headed out of the city, away from the streetlights, towards the dark, isolated country roads of Indiana. Shanda was trapped, a prisoner in a car with 4 girls who were fueled by a rage she couldn't possibly understand. The drive itself was an ordeal of psychological and physical torment. For hours they drove aimlessly through the cold January night. They took Shanda's coat, her jewelry, they taunted her, they hit her. Shanda, small and terrified, pleaded with them. She begged them to let her go, promising she wouldn't tell anyone. She tried to reason with them, to appeal to their humanity, but there was no humanity to be found in that car. Not that night. The girls were caught in the grip of a mob mentality, each one egging the others on, pushing them further and further into the darkness. The journey was just the beginning. The final destination would be a place of unimaginable horror. The first stop on this journey into hell was a place known as the Witch's Castle, an abandoned, derelict stone building deep in the woods near the town of Madison, Indiana. It was a local haunt for teenagers, a place for parties and dares, but on this night it became a chamber of horrors. They dragged Shanda from the car and into the cold, dark ruins. Here, the violence that had been simmering for weeks finally boiled over. Led by Melinda and Lori, the girls subjected Shanda to a brutal and prolonged assault. It was an attack born of pure, unadulterated hatred. For what felt like an eternity, the torture continued. Shanda was beaten and burned. She was degraded in ways that are honestly difficult to comprehend. Through it all, she was conscious, enduring an agony that no human being should ever have to face. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence were there, watching, participating. Any reluctance they might have felt was washed away by the tide of collective cruelty. They were no longer just followers. They were active participants in the destruction of a young girl's life. Shanda's pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears. Her spirit, her will to live, was being systematically broken. After the assault at the Witch's Castle, they put the grievously injured Shanda back into the car. But they weren't finished with her. They were worried she could still identify them. The thought of getting caught began to creep into their minds, not out of remorse but out of a selfish fear of consequences. So they drove again, looking for a place to finish what they had started. They stopped at Lori Tackett's house, leaving Shanda locked in the trunk of the car, bleeding and freezing while they went inside to clean up and decide what to do next. The cruelty was now mixed with a cold, calculating pragmatism. Inside the house, the decision was made. Shanda could not be allowed to live. She was a witness. She had to be silenced, permanently. So they went back to the car. They retrieved a can of gasoline from the garage, and they drove one last time deeper into the desolate winter landscape. They found a remote, dead-end dirt road, a place where they believed no one would ever find her. The journey that had begun with a lie was about to end with an act of ultimate evil. Shanda Scherer, barely alive, was taken from the trunk for the last time. On that lonely dirt road under the cold, unblinking stars of a January sky, the final act of this tragedy unfolded. Shanda Scherer, battered and broken, was no longer able to resist. She was weak, fading. The 4 girls, her captors and tormentors, pulled her from the car. The air was frigid, the ground frozen, but the hearts of her assailants were colder still. There was no hesitation, no last-minute pang of conscience. The decision had been made. The plan, conceived in jealousy and nurtured by hatred, was now carried out with a chilling finality. They doused her with gasoline. Melinda Lovelace and Lori Tackett were the primary actors in this final horrific moment. They had become monsters, shedding the last vestiges of their own humanity. Shanda was still alive, still breathing, when they set her on fire. It is a fact so horrific, so beyond the pale of normal human behavior, that it defies understanding. They stood and watched as the flames consumed the 12-year-old girl they had targeted for no other reason than a twisted teenage crush. It was an act of pure evil, an indelible stain on the soul of their community. Once the deed was done, the girls simply got back in their car and drove away. They left Shanda's body burning on that desolate road, as if they were leaving behind a piece of trash. They went to a McDonald's for breakfast, a detail so mundane, so jarringly normal, that it underscores the profound disconnect from reality they were experiencing. They laughed and joked, trying to create an alibi, trying to pretend that they hadn't just committed one of the most heinous crimes imaginable. They believed they had gotten away with it. They believed their secret was safe, buried in the ashes on a forgotten country road. But evil, no matter how carefully concealed, has a way of coming to light. They had committed an unspeakable act, and they had left a trail. Not a trail of evidence in the traditional sense, at least not at first, but a trail of whispers, a trail of boasts. In their arrogance and immaturity, they couldn't keep their terrible secret to themselves. The story of what happened on that dreadful night would not stay buried for long. The fire they had started was about to ignite an investigation that would expose their crime to the entire world. The morning after the murder, two hunters were driving down a remote country lane near Madison, Indiana. They saw something in the distance, something smoldering by the side of the road. As they got closer, they made a discovery that would haunt them forever. It was the body of a young girl, burned beyond recognition. The authorities were called immediately. The Indiana State Police arrived on the scene, faced with a crime of shocking brutality. They had no name, no identity for the victim. All they had was a crime scene and the grim task of finding out who she was and who could have done this to her. The investigation began with the painstaking work of identification. Dental records eventually confirmed the worst fears of Steve and Jacques Scherer. The victim was their 12-year-old daughter, Shanda. The news sent a shockwave of grief and horror through the community. Who would do such a thing to a child? The police had their work cut out for them. There was little physical evidence at the scene. The case, it seemed, would have to be broken by old-fashioned police work. Interviews, legwork, and listening to the whispers that were already starting to spread through the local high schools. The break in the case came, as it so often does, from the killers themselves. Melinda, Lori, Hope, and Tony couldn't keep their story straight. More importantly, they couldn't keep quiet. They began to talk. They told friends, they bragged, they let details slip. Teenagers, even those capable of murder, are not masters of discretion. The rumors reached the ears of school officials and eventually the police. Investigators began to focus their attention on the four girls. They brought them in for questioning one by one, separating them, probing their stories for inconsistencies. And under the pressure of interrogation, the wall of silence crumbled. It was Tony Lawrence who broke first, then Hope Rippey. Their stories, filled with horrific detail, confirmed the investigators' suspicions. They confessed to their roles in the kidnapping and murder of Shanda Scherer, and they implicated Melinda Lovelace and Lori Tackett as the ringleaders. The truth was out. It was a truth more terrible than anyone could have imagined. Not a crime committed by some shadowy stranger but by four teenage girls, classmates, neighbors. The enemy was not from without, it was from within. With the confessions, the legal process moved swiftly. The four girls were arrested and charged with the murder of Shanda Scherer. Given the horrific nature of the crime, the state of Indiana decided to try them as adults. The trials that followed laid bare the entire, sordid story for the public to see. The jealousy, the planning, the hours of torture, the final brutal act. The community watched in stunned silence as the details emerged, struggling to comprehend how four of their own children could be capable of such profound evil. Justice was demanded, swift and severe. Melinda Lovelace and Lori Tackett, the two who were deemed most culpable, the leaders of the pack, were both convicted of murder and sentenced to 60 years in prison. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence, who cooperated with prosecutors and whose roles were considered less central, though still horrific, received lesser sentences. Hope was sentenced to a maximum of 60 years, which was later reduced, and Tony received a 20-year sentence. The gavel fell, and the legal chapter of the story came to a close. But for the families and for the community, the emotional scars would remain. The case left an indelible mark on southern Indiana. It shattered the illusion of small-town safety. It forced parents and teachers to look at the teenagers in their midst and wonder what darkness could be lurking behind their youthful faces. The names Shanda Scherer and Melinda Loveless became a cautionary tale, a story told to warn of the dangers of bullying, jealousy, and unchecked rage. The Witch's Castle, once a place of teenage folklore, became a memorial to a lost child, a place forever associated with an unspeakable crime before it was eventually torn down as if to erase the stain. Decades have passed since that terrible night in 1992. The killers have served their time. Melinda Loveless was released in 2019, Lori Tackett in 2018, Hope Rippey in 2006, and Toni Lawrence in 2000. They are free women now, living their lives. But the memory of Shanda Scherer endures. She remains forever 12 years old, a symbol of innocence lost. Her story serves as a chilling reminder that monsters are not always strangers who leap from the shadows. Sometimes they are the people we know, and sometimes the darkest places are not in abandoned castles, but in the human heart. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe for more true crime documentaries and stories. Your support helps us bring more content like this to you.